Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to turn to John Perkins, former economic hitman, who is now an author and public speaker. John, welcome back to the Kaiser Report.
It's great to be with you again, Max. Thanks.
All right, fantastic. So I wanted to, before Edward Snowden revelations, before Julian Assange revelations, there was the economic hitman revelations, that there was the IMF, that they were doing dirty things, and they were taking world leaders out to protect the banksters. So let me talk about what's happening in the Middle East and Eastern Europe, where IMF debt, whether in Egypt, Libya, or Ukraine, always seems to follow coups. What's your current thinking?
Well, it's the same old story, except it's ratcheted up several notches. You know, it's this process of basically more than anything, corporations taking over the world. I mean, I think really for the first time in history we have a true global empire, and it's the multinational corporations. And the IMF essentially works for the big corporations. The World Bank does, the Pentagon does, the CIA does. You know, I mean, the U.S. government it's not an American empire. It's a corporate empire, but the U.S. government is very strongly behind it. And we constantly have these revolving doors where the head of some big corporation becomes the head of becomes president of the United States, or becomes head of the watchdog agency that's supposedly watchdogging oil companies. Well, it's a former oil executive who's going to go back into the oil industry. We're really living in a world that's controlled by what I call the corporatocracy, the leaders of big corporations who also tend to be the leaders of Wall Street and the U.S. government and many other governments too.
What about this idea that there's a cycle that's repeating, but it seems like the public, for the most part, forgets. They don't seem to understand that every time there's a new episode, it's all connected. What's happening today and in these areas around the world, this is connected to what we've seen in the last 20 or 30 years. The empire, as you call it, the U.S. dollar empire. Why is there such a propensity toward amnesia?
Well, I think a lot of that goes to do with the fact that people around the world feel like they're getting better in some respects. So we've got the internet. Everybody's got television today, you know. Everybody's got refrigerators, not everybody, but more and more people. The material things that seem to make life better, that Hollywood tells us makes us happy, are more prevalent throughout the world. So there seems to be this growing prosperity, and yet at the same time what we're really understanding is that the rich are getting a lot richer. You know, it recently came out that 85 people have control more resources than half the world's population, and that you know, we're living in a feudal society, but the people, the bourgeois, the people living outside the castle, are also getting all these little perks. And yet I also think, Max, people are waking up. I mean, I think we're seeing this around the world. I'm encouraged by what we're seeing, people, you know, really demonstrating against climate change, people demonstrating against Wall Street. I think people are waking up wherever I go. And I've been traveling on the speaking tour for about 10 years since Confessions came out, and I've really seen a change in attitudes around the world. So I think people are beginning to wake up, but we're also getting all these perks all the time that make us feel like we're all getting better lives.
Now, you mentioned you're out there in the public, you're speaking with people, you're shaking hands with people, and the question is, I want to talk a little bit about how you are trying to affect people or reach people in a different way than just to educate them about the facts. It seems like you're also trying to bring about a consciousness raising. Your background going back to the 60s, you were originally in the Peace Corps working with folks, indigenous peoples in South America. And then you started your career as the economic hitman that we know about from your books. But it seems like you're back, maybe into the period of the indigenous people who seem to have something sacred that is missing from today's culture. And so today when you talk about, for example, shape-shifting, it goes back to these kind of indigenous cultures, and so you see that there's a possibility to bring about in our modern era this has an application as such. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is very fair, and I'm here in London to speak at this conference this weekend on plant consciousness, and which is very interesting. The indigenous people all over the world, and I've studied with indigenous shamans on just about every continent, and they all have prophecies that we've entered a time with the potential for tremendous change. And some of these prophecies go back thousands of years when this time was prophesied, the Mayans, the Quechua, and so forth. And I really do feel that we are going through a consciousness revolution, and I feel that the future may look back on this time as being the greatest revolution so far in history, bigger than the agricultural or the industrial revolution, a consciousness revolution where we're waking up to the fact that we live on a very fragile space station that doesn't have any shuttles, and we need to take care of it. And the fact that we can all communicate with each other, the fact that this program can be instantaneously viewed around the world by people deep in the Amazon, in the Himalayas. That couldn't happen 5 years ago. It's happening today. People are communicating. There's an awakening that's happening, a consciousness revolution, and I feel that my job, and I feel very blessed to have this job, is to go around the world and announce this.
I'll give you an example of some activism here in the UK. We've been talking a long time on this show about Wonga, which is a payday lender, that at one point was charging annualized interest rates of 5,000%. As a result of our revealing and pushing the near criminality of this company, they were forced now to roll back their work doing this. They're now having to forgive 330,000 people of what are essentially illegal, usurious loan sharking. And so is that an example of what you're talking about? So in other words, this company, which is tied into that IMF system of banking oppression, they're getting their wings clipped. They'll probably be put out of business. A lot of people say that's a bad thing, but your thoughts would be what?
Well, my thoughts would be it's a good thing. I mean, you've exposed something very, very important here to expose, which doesn't mean giving people loans is a bad thing, but it means that they're doing it at those usurious rates. That's criminals, obviously criminal. And yeah, I think we're at this time when this is becoming a lot clearer. So the fact that we're talking about this, Max, is very encouraging. And a lot of people are viewing this show. We've still got these, like in the United States, we have these major networks like CNN, Fox, and NBC and ABC who are kind of spewing the party line for the most part. There's some exceptions. But we've also got all this alternative media now. And so I think we're in a classic clash. It's like the feudal lords clashing with the Robin Hoods of the world. We're at this time when there's this amazing clash, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. But what we do know is that there's a growing number of people who are becoming aware and who are becoming activists in trying to change the situation. At the same time, the status quo steps in harder and harder and harder. So the United States has all these draconian laws now. They can listen to everything we say. They can watch everything we do. It's happening in England too, of course. It's happening around the world to a certain degree. And at the same time, there's another whole group of people that's exposing this more and more and more. And I find, for example, in going to colleges and business schools, MBA programs and law programs, advanced programs, that 10 years ago, I would ask the students there, well, what are your goals in life? And they would say, money and power. And today, I don't hear that very much anymore. What I hear is, well, I want to have kids, and I want a better world. I can see that we're creating a disaster here on this planet. We've got to do something to change it.
Have we hit peak bankster?
Probably not. But I think we're also realizing that there is a peak bankster, and that's an important realization.
Okay, let me also add, to put this into historical context, because your book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, was really a seminal moment in this consciousness of raising a movement. And a lot of the work in that book and your work goes back to Latin America, when you were active in Latin America. And now we find that in Latin America, they have a lot of governments that are more in tune with the indigenous populations. They seem to be eschewing the IMF, et cetera. Is that sustainable in your view? Do you think that's going to stick now, that they've kind of rounded the corner and they're now on a self-deterministic path?
I sure hope so. But I think we have to look at historically, why did that happen? So for many years, there's been this undercurrent throughout Latin America of wanting to put down the corporatocracy, wanting to get up from under that. We saw sort of the communist movement back there in the 60s and 70s and so on. But it never quite worked out. And then we had the Chavez situation. So Hugo Chavez becomes president of Venezuela, partly because there had been such terrible presidents before him. And Bush goes after Chavez. There's a coup in 2002. But Chavez survives the coup. You know, he was very, very smart, and the timing was perfect for him. When he survived the coup, Bush couldn't send in the military at that point. He was so engaged in the Middle East and was afraid that we'd lose Middle Eastern oil. The oil companies were all pressuring him not to go after Venezuela because they thought they might need Venezuelan oil. And so in a way, Chavez's timing was perfect. But the fact of the matter is he showed the CIA up to be a paper tiger. And suddenly throughout Latin America, these movements now come forward, and you get guys like Rafael Correa, president of Ecuador, and Morales of Bolivia, and 10 countries then voted in democratic presidents. Countries that throughout most of my lifetime had been run by brutal dictators, many of them put into power or kept there by the CIA. And suddenly all that changed because people felt that that they no longer were under the thumb of a totalitarian.
So they hit their Pete Bankster moment.
They hit that moment. Now, can that be sustained? We know today, I know that today there's tremendous pressure being put on all these presidents. And today presidents are very, very vulnerable. You know, you don't have to take a president out with a coup or a bullet anymore. In many countries, you can take him out with a sex scandal or a drug scandal. And it doesn't even have to be true. These things can be created. I mean, we've seen people taken down. We saw Clinton impeached because of a sex scandal.
We have about a minute left. Just to follow up on that point, how has the financial hitman aspect of things changed? In other words, it seems that given the growth of derivatives products over the past 10 or 15 years, these governments can collude and take down a country as they did in Greece. You know, Greece was attacked by bankers, and now it's being chopped up. As a result, it was a classic private equity scam, essentially. We only have 30 seconds, unfortunately, but have the weapons, the financial weapons, increased?
Yes, they've increased. And also, people's awareness has increased. So again, we have this clash that's going on, and I think, you know, we don't know what the outcome of the story is going to be, but I think for you and me and people like us to keep exposing this, and for the common man to recognize that we have power. Ultimately, the corporations depend on us to buy their goods and services and invest in them. So we have the power to take back control, and we need to do that.
All right, John Perkins, we're out of time. Thanks so much. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, John Perkins, author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman and many other books. You can find out all about where he's going to be appearing next at johnperkins.org. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Kaiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.